Keep it alive through these lines I write. I keep it live cause I thrive. I might just blow your mind tonight. I'm so hyped, but it's no hype. From this height, it's direct hits on sight. I'm your type, lend me your ears to show you that there's something in me. I'm not giving up, I'm standing right here, holding these days hostage. And I'll make this my year. We turning fear into love, and the love's in the air. I love doing this cause nothing compares. Nothing can share that same type of feeling when you feeling them flares. They can't catch it, it's havoc. I rip to a tear, switch a scenario. My stereos, I leave them impaired. Variables start to change and they're all in my range. I just gotta grab it, it's all mathematics. Every step is drastic, I make it fantastic. I'm trying to take your breath away. Asthmatic.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.
Yeah, just nod your head with it. So explicit and vivid. Every image is intricate, intimate. I put my all into it. No scrimmage and no rules. I'm a pro tool. Hear my heartbeat beat into the vocals. I'm so no-go, lost my mind, oh no. It's ponderoso, dope, so no overdose, cause it's dope, yo. Man, this is house grown, mixed with some milestones. So I let the style flow down like the Dow Jones. Bringing it with some foul tones, letting the crowd know we getting loud, so it's eardrum rudiments. Yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anti-Media Radio Show. Once again with your host Nick Bernabe here on ucy.tv and the antimedia.org/radio. Really happy to be back live and well on this Wednesday, May 9th, 2018. And got a lot of heavy stuff going on right now. A lot of the stuff going on right now in the Middle East, Iran, Syria, Israel. It's not looking great. It's not. It's really not. But we're going to have to see how this all plays out. We've been talking about the situation in Syria for, since we started doing this show. It's been going on for, I think, since 2013-ish. So, we've been doing this show for like 4 years, and it's been a big topic. Syria is a huge proxy war, and unfortunately, the innocent Syrians are caught in the crossfire between a bunch of different powers vying for control over that region. What's going on right now is Iran and Israel have now turned the place into a hot conflict, and it's been a proxy war from the beginning. Now the biggest players in the region, the two big boys on the block, I guess, Russia versus the United States, and of course Russia has been propping up the Syrian government from day one, and they've been an ally of Syria for a very long time. In fact, it predates. It goes all the way back to the Soviet era. The naval base that Russia has there, it's been there for a long time. The Soviets helped develop Syria and stuff. So it's a natural ally in the Middle East for Russia. Think of Syria as America's Jordan for Russia, I guess you could say, where I wouldn't compare it to Saudi Arabia or Israel, because those are two whole different beasts. Syria is a pretty weak state. It's not outwardly aggressive, doesn't really try to meddle in the affairs of other people. But mainly, I think for Russia, the strategic value there is they got their base, and then the oil pipelines competing oil interests that are trying to use Syrian territory to route their pipelines. Russia has an interest in keeping pipelines not going through there and into Europe unless it's one of their own, because currently Russia supplies a lot of the gas to Europe. You know, the natural gas, the oil, the petrol. So, you know, Russia has a lot of interest there. The U.S. also has oil interests, trying to route a pipeline through there for the same reason, to outmaneuver or to circumvent Russian, you know, dominance of the oil markets for Europe. The Saudis and the Arab monarchs have been trying to run a pipeline through there. And, of course, Israel, Saudi Arabia are aligned with U.S. interests. And they have their interests going on, and their interests are our interests, and vice versa. And Iran has become a major player over there because Iran has been sending over a lot of military equipment, militias, actual military guys, Hezbollah, and other militias are there that are backed by Iran or made up of Iranian fighters. And Israel and Iran have been kind of rivals for a long time, and they're always back and forth with each other. Not exactly friendly relationship between these two. And with Trump pulling out of the nuclear agreement, which was brokered under Obama, very unpopular with conservatives and stuff, Trump just pulled out. And Israel just started bombing Iranian targets inside of Syria. And now we have reports saying that Iran is launching attacks on Israel from inside of Syria. Supposedly 20 missiles were shot, some of them hitting Israeli military bases. It's safe to say that this is a major escalation between Iran and Israel. And of course, if a legitimate war, now it's still a proxy war, they're still fighting each other unofficially in Syria. But if a legitimate war were to break out between Iran and Israel, well, I'm sure you could guess which side the United States is going to be picking. Which basically means that Israel could drag the U.S. into a war with Iran. And Iran has some allies, including Syria, which, Iran and Syria have a mutual defense agreement. So if the U.S. were to start going to war with Iran, well, then we'd be at war with Syria as well. And going to a logical conclusion here, if Syria is backing Iran, well, Russia may also back Iran. And we're talking about the worst case scenario here, where Israel can trigger a chain reaction which causes a big war breaking out between nuclear armed modernized militaries. I wouldn't call Russia a superpower. And then taking it another step further, it's pretty obvious now that China would take sides with Russia if something were to happen. And I think that is actually a legitimate counterbalance to NATO, is the Russia, China, Iran kind of alliance. That is a legitimate challenge, I think. A legitimate challenge. Now, of course, China doesn't have a military built up like the U.S. does. But they have a huge army, lots and lots and lots of personnel. I think if China really, really needed to, they can probably raise an army the size of the entire population of the United States. I mean, China, if it needed to, could get 100 million dudes, put a rifle in their hand and send them out to fight. I mean, kind of what went on with Russia in World War II, right? Just sending tens of millions of dudes out there, untrained, rifles in hand. I mean, they beat the Nazis. They did. We're in a tough spot. And even now, Trump just did this Iran stuff yesterday. And even now, there really isn't much pushback on Trump's foreign policy. And I'm really surprised by that. I honestly thought that the quote-unquote left, the Democrats, would actually say, you know what, we're not going to allow, Trump to get us into this big-ass war with Russia and all this stuff. But the Democrats are, in fact, the Democratic establishment is part of the group pushing the U.S. closer into conflict with Russia, with all the Russiagate stuff, which just continues to go on, and, blaming Russia for everything, and blaming Russia for the election, and blaming Russia for a bunch of stuff, basically. So, not only is Trump's base very anti-Iranian, very much against the Iran nuclear agreement, but the Democrats are also pushing the U.S. in a direction of conflict. Now, I think you'll see the Democrats trying to be a little bit soft on Iran, because keep in mind, their president is the one who brokered the agreement. And so, Obama, in the eyes of the average Democrat, can do no wrong. And so when Obama did the Iran deal, which I personally think is a good step, what was a good step in trying to start some sort of peace process, or a normalization of relations between Iran and the U.S., the Democrats supported that. So I'm hoping that we're going to start seeing some, Democratic opposition to that. But it doesn't matter, because the big fish to fry, again, goes back to Russia. These smaller countries are still just part of the proxy, right? And if the U.S. did end up going and fighting with Iran, it would turn into another proxy war, where Russia would be probably backing the Iranian government, and who knows, even China. China's been developing closer relations with Iran, and I think China is probably their biggest oil buyer. I would have to double check that, but that's my assumption. So we're talking about a really complicated situation over there, and keep in mind with Israel, it's this nation that has been beating the shit out of its own people, killing its own people. I mean, just all month they're just gunning down Palestinians and repressing and oppressing and imprisoning, shooting, injuring, maiming. Many of these things are war crimes. I mean, taking away their food, cutting off their water, controlling their electricity. I mean, what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is nothing short of apartheid, and we could even start talking about it being a type of genocide pretty soon here if this stuff continues. I mean, I'm sure some would argue that it already is. Israel is capable of doing some nasty things, and I think a lot of it has to do with this blowback from World War II, where, we all know what happened with the Nazis and what they did to the Jews, and part of the whole reason why the State of Israel was created was out of, something has to be done about what happened with the Nazis and the Jews. And so, you got these Israelis who, I think a lot of these hardliners, the guys that are in the Likud party with, Netanyahu and stuff, a lot of these hardliners are like, I guess you can kind of look at them like neocons, but they have this attitude of never again, right? Like that Israel will never allow someone to do what had been done to them by the Nazis again. And I think a lot of that attitude has fostered a lot of extremist views over there. where Israel is going way overboard in its policies when it comes to its neighbors, including the Palestinians. Like going way overboard because they're just so radicalized by what happened to them during World War II that they kind of turned into the monster that they were thinking they were going to oppose in many ways. In many ways, I think they've turned into that monster. What they're doing to the Palestinians, I mean, it's pretty similar to what the Nazis did to the Jews, you know. And it's kind of like this cycle of abuse where it happened to one people, and then a few generations later, like, well, we're never going to let that happen to us again, but we've gone so ridiculous about it but now we're doing the same exact thing to other people. And so there's a lot of history there, and it's a very, 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 very complicated situation. And with Trump just kind of taking a bulldozer to the peace process, I don't know if these guys, you know, John Bolton has been calling for the overthrow, regime change of Iran for like ever. I mean, repeatedly. Many people in Trump's cabinet very hawkish towards Iran. I think the CIA has a hard-on for Iran because of how much of a failure their operations have been there in the past. I think it's no secret that basically every Republican in the government, except for maybe a handful, if you ask them, well, should we have a regime change in Iran, they'd probably say yes. And a good amount of Democrats, too. In Trump's speech, we have an article on it here. Let me pull this up. Trump's speech yesterday, when he was pulling out of the Iran deal, it was just textbook propaganda. Just how many times did he repeat the word regime? And all these descriptors of how Iran is so bad and so evil and supports terrorism. And I have a quote here from Trump. Quote, Iran remains the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism and provides assistance to Hezbollah, Hamas, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and other terrorist networks. More or less, Trump, by using that kind of rhetoric, he's basically saying Iran is a terrorist nation. And under the authorization of use of military force passed shortly after 9/11, the president has the authority, supposedly anyway, to attack anyone who he deems a terrorist. And that I think he has to let Congress know within like 30 or 60 days, oh, by the way, you know, I bombed so-and-so because I thought they were a terrorist. Trump is basically inferring here that he has the authority to already bomb Iran, and that he can just unilaterally order airstrikes, say it was targeting some kind of terrorist something or other, and it would, in theory, be completely legal under U.S. law, despite no declaration of war. You know, so as long as you say, hey, we're not bombing Iran because Iran is bad, we're bombing Iran because they're terrorists, and therefore I don't gotta declare war or ask permission to do it. And the presidents, I think since World War II, have kind of figured out a way to do that. You know, the country has, the U.S. has been attacking and bombing and overthrowing governments like literally all over the world, from Central America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, you know, the Korean War, the Vietnam War. None of those were actually declared wars through the Congress. So, I mean, technically they were not constitutional wars. I think the arguments are made that these guys created authority through some other type of resolution or whatever, right? But the precedent is there. The language has been set. The propaganda against Iran has been deep-rooted. I mean, I think the anti-Iranian propaganda is, like, at this point, multi-generational. Ever since the Shah was removed from power in the Islamic Revolution, 1979? Ever since then, the U.S. has been on a complete anti-Iranian propaganda mode. So you'll see it in your books, in your school books. The kids learn about it. It's on TV every day. The candidates say the 2012 Republican primary, all those debates was just how quickly should we bomb Iran if you become president? And it's like Mitt Romney's like, well, I'll bomb them in the first week, and the other guy's like, well, I'll bomb them in the first day, and the other guy's like, well, I'll bomb them in the first month. And then, of course, you had Ron Paul up there like, well, maybe we shouldn't bomb him. Oh, shut up, dude, bro. Take the mic away from this guy. The media has a very anti-Iranian slant because, the corporate media is deeply, deeply in bed with the military-industrial complex, the defense contractors, all the dudes that make money killing people. The media is the one that greases the skids for them, right? The media greases it up, say, oh, my God, Iran did this, Iran did that, Iran is so bad, Iran is this, Assad is that, Putin is this, Kim Jong-un is that. Like, the media, we don't have an independent mainstream media in the United States. We have a kind of informational propaganda arm of the military-industrial complex. I mean, there's really no denying that at this point. These guys just work hand in hand. And yeah, they cover other stuff, and every now and then they're forced to cover leaks, or they're forced to cover the Snowden leaks, or they're forced to cover a whistleblower. But generally speaking, these guys don't step out of line they don't step out from under the shadow of the empire. And anyone who does, like us, we get branded Russian operatives or, useful idiots for the Kremlin. Facebook comes and crushes our reach on the algorithm. I don't got to tell this story again. But the stage is set. And that's the point I'm trying to get to here. The stage has been set for the United States to be at war, or at the very least to attack or directly bomb Iran. And don't think that it's like, oh, it won't ever happen. I mean, when was the last time the U.S. tried to do something over there? Didn't we back Saddam Hussein to invade Iran? And in fact, didn't we let him, and maybe even, dare I say, encourage Saddam Hussein to use chemical weapons against Iran? If my memory serves me correctly, I think Saddam's chemical attacks on Iran killed like 500,000 people. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, he hurt a few dozen people like they supposedly say Assad did, which still, there's no evidence of that, and there probably won't be, because most of the evidence I've seen, it looked like it was staged by the rebels to get a reaction, keep the U.S. involved, like literally a few days after Trump said he was thinking about pulling out. So pretty obvious on that front. The other chemical attack, the first one, when Obama was still president, it's like Obama put out a statement, was like, okay, well, if they use chemical weapons, that's the red line. We won't allow them to, we'll do something if they use chemical weapons. It's like a few weeks later, oh, by the way, we decided to use chemical weapons, as if inviting the U.S. to go invade them or overthrow the government. I mean, it doesn't make logical sense. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't like calling shit false flags when there's no evidence for it. But the chemical attacks in Syria just really don't make any logical sense, and therefore it's more than likely that they were maybe not quite like a false flag in the general sense that you would think of it as, where it's one government doing something and blaming it on another government, but more like these rebels are staging attacks, pretending like they're happening, or actually doing them against their own people in their own neighborhoods that they're occupying, and then saying, "Oh my God, the Assad regime did this. You guys have to do something about it." And of course, Trump has already lashed out and unilaterally bombed the Syrian government twice, or on 2 separate occasions, I should say. Which those acts, these weren't acts saying, "Oh, we're bombing Syria because they did terrorism." The U.S. didn't even make that argument, and therefore what Trump actually did in Syria was completely illegal by U.S. standards. It was illegal by international law. And what happened? I mean, what happened after Trump bombed Syria? Maybe his approval rating went up. He finally got some positive media coverage. They finally said, "Oh, Trump's presidential." Brian Williams over there talking about how beautiful our fucking Tomahawk cruise missiles are. And then you got the absentee anti-war movement nowhere to be found. I mean, I went to the march in San Diego, and unfortunately, like 30 people showed up, and 30 people ain't gonna stop this from happening. Yeah, I mean, we got to do something about this, because it can escalate and get worse and worse and worse, and to the point one day we look back and say, "Oh shit, that's how World War III started. Some dudes did a fucking staged chemical attack in Syria, and all of a sudden one thing leads to another, and the people, the subjects of the American empire, us, you and me, the only people who really can probably actually do something to prevent this big war. We're going to look back one day and say, are we going to say, "Oh shit, yeah, they were so consumed with fucking Trump's Twitter and Stormy Daniels and Russia and the Kardashians and Kanye West to even fucking bother to care about that we're about to get into World War III"? Are we going to look back and say that? Are we going to look back and say, "Damn, dude, America saved the day they stepped in and prevent their government from starting World War III"? I'm pretty sure we're getting close to that point. We've been talking about these conflicts for a long time, and they've been really on the edge for a really long time. But Trump pulling out of that agreement, Israel and Iran now straight up attacking each other. I mean, if the reports wind up being true, if it winds up being true that Iran really did fire 20 missiles into Israel and hit their military bases, well, that's going to give Israel a blank check to start bombing Iran directly. And guess who's going to be helping them bomb them? The U.S. Now, one curious detail that I think is being left out in a lot of the mainstream reporting here is that, according to the reports I've seen, Iran is bombing Israeli military bases in Golan Heights. Now, we have to remember, Golan Heights is actually Syrian territory, according to international law. It's occupied by Israel, invaded it. Basically, imagine what Russia did in Crimea. Israel took Golan. So, if Iran is bombing Israeli targets in the Golan Heights, well, Iran then isn't bombing Israel, really. Iran is hitting Israeli targets inside of Syria. And so it's a big detail that needs to be looked at and understood before we start reacting here, overreacting, and saying, "Oh my God, Iran is bombing Israel. We have to do something about it." That doesn't appear to be the case. Israel is actually occupying the Golan Heights, Syrian territory, and Iran is hitting them there. And so that's a very important detail that I think the Europeans aren't going to overlook. The U.S. is probably going to overlook those details and say, "Oh my God, we got to do something about this." But I think the Europeans, being that they actually had to live inside and through the last huge world war, are less likely, less inclined to be like, "Oh yeah, totally. Let's go ahead and just start a huge ass war real quick." I think the Europeans are more like, "No, let's really, really verify and get the details before we do anything stupid like that, and make sure that we really, really that it's really worth it for this." And the saddest part of it all is that there's no reason for this shit. There's no reason to be fighting wars over fucking oil anymore. Like, seriously, it's the dumbest thing that we're going and killing people for this when we could easily make do for everyone on this damn planet and nobody has to live in poverty. These psychopaths who can't get enough of power keep on pitting us regular, everyday, working class people who literally just want a house over their, a roof over their head, food on the table, free to do what you want to do, you know, clean water, maybe electricity. I mean, that's generally what people want. Free time. I mean, everyone likes free time. Everyone likes traveling, and you know, we all want the same stuff. These assholes keep tricking us into killing each other so that they can have extra stuff, so that they can have billions of dollars and, you know, 5 houses and 10 cars and all this acclaim and fame and all this power. These guys don't care that the rest of us are dying. And I hope the American people fucking snap out of this slumber in time before we lose this way of life that the rest of the world should also be enjoying. There's no reason people in Iran can't have the same standard of living that Americans do. There's no reason people in North Korea can't have the standard of living Americans do. There's no reason people in Venezuela can't have the same standard of living. But the reason is that people keep tricking us into killing and tricking us into allowing ourselves to be victims of theft and extortion by the governments and the cartels. Which, let's face it, these big companies are basically just cartels. From now on, I'm going to refer to these big companies as cartels because that's what they do. They're cartels. They're corrupt. They control governments. They use violence to attain their goals. They're cartels. Walmart, Google, Coca-Cola, Monsanto, these big-ass companies are cartels. Let's be more honest about that. They control the governments, and they use them to enrich themselves. And that's what creates a bunch of conflict. Look, let's face it, most modern conflicts are over resources. People fighting for land, oil, food, farmland, minerals, timber, ocean, space, fishing, territories. That's what all these assholes want to fight over. Because just having enough ain't enough for them. They want it all. They want everything, and they don't care who has to die in the process or suffer. And, you know, these guys are sociopaths. They can do that stuff. People, they start wars, you know, let's just say Halliburton, for instance, encouraged the war in Iraq so they can go in there and make $35 billion, and they didn't care that 1 million Iraqis died in the process as long as they got rich. That's sociopath shit. When you don't have that kind of conscience, you're okay with all these other people dying and shit. That's straight up sociopathic shit, and they're all running the show right now. And there's 1 million of us to every one of them, and we don't do a fucking thing about it. Because they got everyone tricked. They got everyone psyched out. They got They got all the scientific research backing up their propaganda, and they're controlling their group psychology. They got all this Sigmund, and they got all this Freudian and all this research backing up their strategies. They know how to control us. They control us with Kanye West, and they control us with Donald Trump, and they control you with scaring you about Muslims and tricking you into thinking Mexicans are out to steal your jobs and your women. That's how they control you. They divide you up, get you to distrust your neighbor, get the crowd mentality going, they get the herd flowing, and they get any of these idiots to go and sport wars, just like they did against Saddam Hussein. I mean, the whole country got behind that shit. How many members of Congress voted against that? 3 or something? Saddam Hussein, they never had legitimate proof of all the claims. They never had proof that he backed any of the shit went on 9/11. In fact, it wasn't him, it was the damn Saudis. We know that. They knew that at the time. They hid that shit because it didn't suit what they were trying to accomplish. They knew damn well that it was the Saudis. Didn't matter. Colin Powell went up there shaking his little fucking container, talking about chemical weapons of mass destruction. And Americans bit that shit hook, line, and sinker. I don't know, 95% of Americans probably got behind that shit. They have us figured out. They've got us figured out. And you'd think, now that we got the internet, we know all this stuff, and we got all this information, we know that the Iraq thing was a big fucking lie. I mean, shit, Trump ran against that shit. Trump said Bush should have never done that shit. Trump said Obama should have never done what he did in Libya. Trump said Obama shouldn't have gotten involved in Syria. And look at him now. Bombing Syria, trying to start shit with Iran, literally bombing Russians inside of Syria when he ran on a platform of being more friendly with Russia. Got you guys all tricked. Got everybody tricked. And the amount of callous conversations I'm seeing, even among people I know personally. I mean, there's a big story just a few days ago about how a new policy from Jeff Sessions may wind up basically taking children away from their mothers when they get caught entering into the United States, immigrating into the United States illegally. Taking kids away from their moms. And dude, people are like, well, they shouldn't have come here, so fuck it, they deserve it. Take the fucking kids away. Can you imagine that? I mean, I don't know because I'm not a mother, and I know moms only know what it's like to be a mother, but can you imagine getting your kid taken away from you, or as a kid, having your mom taken away from you? And some douchebag on fucking Facebook is like, oh, well, they shouldn't have fucking done it, that's what they get, they deserved it. Makes me want to start punching people. I'm not going to lie. If someone said that to me in real life, I'll punch them, dude. I don't care, dude. They got people so callous with this propaganda. And, every time an immigrant happens to commit a crime, which, many studies have shown immigrants commit crimes at a much lower rate than the fools that are fucking from here. An immigrant happens to commit a crime, and it's like headline fucking news across all networks. And then these same networks are like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Trump is so racist against Mexicans. I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he said they're bringing rapists. And and criminals and drug addicts. I can't believe that. But these same fucking outlets run these headline stories whenever an immigrant does something. It's unbelievable the amount of nationalistic xenophobia going on in this country right now. And I think that's part of the reason why there's no fucking anti-war movement. These fuckers don't give two shits about Muslims dying. They don't give, like, honestly, they don't. They don't care about Muslims dying. Muslims are dying on a daily basis because of the U.S.-backed operations going on in, I mean, you name it, going on in Syria, going on in Yemen, going on in Somalia, going on against Palestinians. You name it. No one gives two fucking shits about that over here in the United States because our guys aren't dying. We got drones doing the dirty work, and we got special ops just going in there and taking out a few people here and there. One American dies. I don't know how often does an American military guy die nowadays in operations around the world? I only hear about like one or two a month. I mean, there's like American troops ain't dying. And therefore, American people don't give two fucks about everyone else that's dying right now. Because the propaganda works. After 9/11, they made every Muslim look like a fucking terrorist dog. Like, a lot of Americans think of Muslims as terrorist dogs. Not as just other human beings, not as other people, not as, people who have the same wants and needs as you and me. They think of them as terrorist dogs. They think of Mexicans as dirty criminals. And that dehumanization, that's the first thing you got to do if you're planning on doing something real bad. After 9/11, dude, I mean, shit. I would have hated to be a Muslim living in the United States after 9/11, dude. How many hate crimes were committed against Muslims after that? And were any of these people culpable? Like, were any of these Muslim people responsible for what went on in 9/11? No. How many crimes were committed against them, and how many Muslims have died since then because of U.S. foreign policies? At least 1 million in Iraq alone. Who knows how many have been killed in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Yemen? Who knows? We'll never even know how many actually died, probably. We'll never get a real body count. These dudes don't report the real numbers. Conservative estimates say 1 million dead Iraqis. When they're going to do something bad, first they're going to demonize the people. Because you can't just go and start deporting Mexicans when everyone is like, oh, Mexicans are nice people. Mexicans are good people. They help the economy. They boost, they rent our houses. They work jobs. They buy groceries. Mexicans are good people. But when you got this rhetoric about Mexicans being rapists, criminals, murderers, gang members, that's the precursor. You got to do that first, and then you can start deporting them. Because then they've been dehumanized, and then most people don't give a shit. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried that something worse is going to start happening to the immigrants from Latin America in this country. Because you dehumanize people, and then something worse comes after that. But it's all kind of related here to this issue of what's going on in foreign policy, is that we have to start understanding and spreading the word that the people dying on the other side of our bombs are indeed people. Just like you and me, they only want the same stuff that we want. 99% of the people in the world are not assholes, they're not radical, they're not terrorists, they're not trying to harm anybody. They're trying to make a decent living and be comfortable. Just like you and me. But I think that has been intentionally propagandized out of the American psyche. And it goes on, it ain't just here either. I mean, I would say every country probably has an issue with dehumanizing certain other people In Europe, it has to do with migrants from Africa and Muslim refugees fleeing the Syria and stuff. Syrian refugees in Europe are dealing with the same thing. Native Americans here, black people here. Native Americans in Latin America and Mexico, South America, Native Americans. Black Hispanics. I mean, it goes on all over, dude. In China, with the Rohingya. In India, with Muslims. All over the place, man. All over it goes on. And we have to remember, this is the tactic that these motherfuckers use to divide us against each other so that they can remain safe, and they can remain rich, and they can remain in power. They trick you into thinking other people are the problem instead of themselves. And shit, be dumb if they didn't, right? I mean, I don't agree with these powerful motherfuckers. But it'd be dumb if they were like, you know what? I'm actually the problem here. I'm the reason why you guys are all poor right now and why we got into this big-ass war. Vote for me. Like, no, that'd be dumb. They're not going to do that. They are going to say that someone else is to blame. I mean, shit, that's textbook American politics. Just on the surface level, oh, when the Republican's been in office, the Democrat runs and he said, oh, it's all the Republicans' fault. And when a Democrat's in office, the Republican runs and said, oh, it's all the Democrats' fault. Obvious stuff. But on a deeper, more troubling level is when they start actually dehumanizing racial groups and religions. And I'll tell you something, dude. Trump has been a very unpopular president. There's 3 policies of his that are actually popular. Building the wall, securing the border is one. Banning Muslim people from entering the United States is another. And bombing these Muslim countries is the third one. Like, those are the only 3 things Trump has done that's actually popular. And that tells you something. Everyone's like, oh my god, I can't believe Trump won the election. Bullshit, dude. I understand why Trump won the election at this point. Because this country has got some fucked up mentality going on. I don't think the people here are inherently like that. It's been deliberately done with all this propaganda, dude. And the media, and just from day one, the moment you go to fucking kindergarten, they start cramming this shit into your fucking skull. American exceptionalism, all that bullshit. Look, they did the same thing to the Native Americans a long time ago. Still goes on to this day. When you read those old books, those Western, you watch those old Western movies, Native Americans weren't considered human beings. They were savages. They were brutes. They were subhuman. And you think that the people who actually were running shit back in those days actually believed that those people were subhuman? Or did they just tell everyone else they were subhuman because they wanted you to kill them all? And they didn't want no one to feel bad when you executed a whole tribe or took all their land, raped their women. Maybe they didn't actually believe that. I don't believe that the people in charge right now, these rich fucks, this military-industrial complex, these dudes that actually control the governments and shit. I mean, I know Trump's an idiot, but I mean the real smart people behind the scenes, I don't think they believe Muslims are subhuman. I don't think they believe Mexicans are subhuman. But they tell us that because they want us doing their dirty work. And many, many people are just willing subjects. And this ain't nothing new. This ain't, it's just because TV has been able to spread more propaganda. This shit's been going on for a long time. Look at the Nazis. Look what the Nazis did with the Jews. That was by tricking people into believing one problem could be blamed on one religious ethnic group. And they highlight certain examples. Look, I'm sure there were some Jewish people in Germany that did some stuff that wasn't good. And the Nazis were able to just inflate those things and turn it into a much, much bigger deal and trying to blame everybody for it. Just like on 9/11, they start blaming all the Muslims for it. And just like When an immigrant does a crime, they start saying, oh, well, we got to deport all the immigrants. We got to close the borders off to all the immigrants. Same exact shit, dude. It's been going on. America's not unique in that aspect at all. The Nazis did it. It'd been done a long time before the Nazis. I mean, shit, it went on with the Romans. We're talking thousands of years of this same cycle repeating, and we have the tools at our fingertips to end it. Now, maybe for the first time in history, we actually have the tools to end it. But are we going to? I mean, that's the big question. That's the big question. All right, guys, I'm going to cut the show off here. Thank you all for tuning in. We got some big stuff happening over the next few weeks. Hopefully, I'll be able to finally disclose the big development that I've been talking about here that's going to really take us up to the next level. We're working on getting this crypto funding. We'll be knowing about that in the next week and a half as well. So we got some major developments happening. Hopefully, by the end of the month, we're going to have some great fucking news, and we're going to be able to take on these assholes head on and hopefully stop this shit from happening if all things go through the way we want them to. We'll put an end to this. Thank you all for tuning in. Anti-Media Radio. Peace.
Drum rudiments, yeah, we bring it rude again. Move, little hooligan. Music for tuning in, full time to the 10. I'm on my clock like I told you. I'm doing this for dreams we pursuing, but call it a reality, cause there's no illusion.
This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo. This is live through the stereo. Go and let it blow, blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo, stereo.